All right,
Okay.
we're live.
Welcome everyone to this highly anticipated episode of That's Debatable, the formal debate series hosted by Winsome Marketing. Today we're diving into a timely and provocative question. Are AI companions, romantic or otherwise, a positive or negative development for human well-being and social connection? We're joined by two of Winsome's most respected voices in content and strategy, each bringing a unique perspective to this complex issue. Representing the pro side is Youell, the founder and owner of Winsome Marketing, with years of experience in shaping narrative, brand voice, and empathetic communication. Joy brings a thoughtful, optimistic lens to the potential of AI to enhance human connection. And arguing the con side is Keller, head of content at Winsome Marketing, a sharp strategist and storyteller. Lauren raises critical questions about the emotional, ethical, and societal impacts of relying on artificial intelligence for companionship. Together, they will explore both the promises and pitfalls of AI companions, from emotional fulfillment and accessibility to risks of disconnection and dependency. So now, let's get started with the opening statements. You will each have 8 minutes, and we'll begin with Joy. Joy, your 8 minutes starts now.
All right. Well, I'm excited to dive into this. The reality is that we are, as a culture, facing a mental health crisis of unprecedented scale. I think we can all agree with that. There are 30% of adults that experience weekly loneliness. 1 in 6 people worldwide are socially isolated, and mental health treatment is inaccessible to nearly half of the people who need it. AI companions aren't a luxury. They're an essential public health intervention. The mortality impact of loneliness is part of its relevance, right? It exceeds smoking, it exceeds all kinds of conditions, chronic or otherwise. Yet we stigmatize the very technology that could save lives. So this isn't about replacing human connection. It's about providing accessible, evidence-based support when human alternatives don't exist. Today, I will demonstrate that resistance to AI companions stems from cultural prejudice, not evidence. So using rigorous psychological research, I'm going to prove that AI companions fulfill genuine human needs through 3 powerful parallels. So the first is imaginary friends, the second is pets, and the third is therapeutic dolls or role-playing. These aren't inferior substitutes. They're specialized tools that often outperform human relationships in providing consistent, safe, and supportive social experiences. Before examining the evidence, let's establish why humans form relationships at all. So if we zoom out, according to Maslow's hierarchy, right, we seek love and belonging. These are like the fundamental psychological needs that humans have. But research also reveals, if we go further into it, 6 specific motivations that we have for building human relationships or relationships with anyone or anything. The first is that we want to be wanted. So social identity theory shows that people enhance self-esteem by belonging to groups, and even sacrifice material interests to maintain social connections. Second is that we crave social and emotional connection, right? So Baumeister and Leary's landmark 1995 research established that forming and maintaining interpersonal relationships is a fundamental human motivation, with belongingness having multiple and strong effects on emotional patterns and cognitive processes. Third is that we need someone to be there for us. So Cohen and Wills' social support theory demonstrates that support serves as a protective buffer against stress, with perceived support positively related to mental health and self-esteem. The fourth factor is that we want to be understood. Like, we want someone out there who gets us. We want to feel that we are relatable. Rise's 2017 research on felt understanding shows that this experience, the experience of being understood, activates neural regions associated with reward and social connection. There are 2 more. So the fifth is that we want to matter. So self-determination theory identifies relatedness as one of 3 basic psychological needs underlying human growth. We want to feel like we matter to someone or something. And then 6, we seek secure attachment. So this is very important. Bowlby's attachment theory shows the same motivational system creates parent-child bonds. It operates in adult relationships as well. So these are very biologically hardwired into us. The crucial insight is that nowhere in this research of these 6 key reasons we seek relationships does it specify that these needs must be fulfilled by humans. So let's talk about evidence for a second. So the first randomized controlled trial of AI therapy chatbots has delivered groundbreaking results. Dartmouth researchers tested Therabot with 210 adults suffering from clinical level depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. The results were remarkable. So 51% reduction in depression symptoms, a 31% reduction in anxiety, and a 19% improvement in eating disorder symptoms, outcomes comparable to human therapists. Participants used the AI companion for over 6 hours during the study period and rated it highly. Unlike human therapy, and I'm going to make this point a few times because I think it's a salient one, AI companions provide 24/7 accessibility, they eliminate cost barriers, and they remove geographical limitations that prevent millions from accessing care. Let's move on to the second one, which is pets. So I think that there's a really strong parallel to be made here in the way that we relate to animals and the way that we can relate to and benefit from AI chatbots. Our culture readily accepts anthropomorphizing animals, right? Lending human traits to animals. 98% of pet owners globally report health benefits from relationships we know operate on biological conditioning, right? Our pets don't actually love us. They're biologically conditioned to depend on us, and not conscious intention. And that in and of itself might lose me the debate, but it had to be said. The Human Animal Bond Research Institute's 2022 survey of 16,000 pet owners across 8 countries found virtually all reported specific health benefits, including increased happiness, reduced loneliness, and decreased stress. If we accept that a dog's biological conditioning creates meaningful companionship, then we can accept that AI programming creates meaningful understanding. Both represent non-human entities providing genuine human benefit through predictable, responsive behaviors. I want to talk a little bit about imagination too. Okay, so we think about as children, we have imaginary friends. As friends, we have groups of Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games and things like that. Our society celebrates this imaginative engagement with fictional entities across multiple domains, and there are millions of adults that are involved in these kind of things. These experiences demonstrate that humans naturally and beneficially engage with non-human entities in structured social contexts. Players develop empathy, communication skills, and emotional intelligence through sustained interaction with fictional personalities. The same benefits AI companions can provide in a more accessible, individualized format. Can I get a quick time check, Cass?
2 minutes.
Okay. So I've reviewed all of the basics. Here's the 6 reasons why humans need relationships. And none of these exclude non-human relationships. And so then if we're to go further and say, let's look at parallels of non-human relationships and the quantifiable benefits they provide, I've already expounded on that in terms of pets and imaginary play. I want to also talk about 2 other things, which is therapy dolls. So this is another instance of non-human companions providing a kind of authentic support. Clinical evidence proves non-human companions can significantly improve well-being. So Santagata, Masaya, and D'Amelio, and I butchered that, I'm sure, had a 2021 randomized controlled trial with 52 nursing home residents that showed doll therapy participants had significant decreases in behavioral and psychological symptoms compared to standard treatment, with reduced caregiver burden over 90 days. There have been other systematic reviews of participants who found that doll therapy and using other entities, even if they were physical or not, reducing challenging behaviors, improving communication skills, and improving emotional state. So the therapeutic power lies not in the entity or the doll itself, but in the meaningful social role that it enables.
You have 33 seconds left.
So notice the pattern. Every example involves humans finding genuine benefit from relationships with non-human entities. From children's imagination to adult role-playing to clinical interventions, the research consistently shows that these are inferior substitutes. They're specialized tools meeting specific psychological needs, often more effectively than human relationships.
Perfect. Thank you, Joy. Now we'll hear from Lauren, who will argue the opposing position. So, Lauren, your 8 minutes starts now.
My opponent spent a lot of time talking about the importance of relationships, and I'm not here to say that any of that is wrong. I'm not debating that we need human relationships. I'm not debating whether the loneliness epidemic exists. I'm not debating whether people feel isolated, anxious, or disconnected. That's all true. We know that they do. We're also not debating about the state of healthcare and infrastructure and mental health resources in this country, because all of those things are sorely lacking. What we're doing here is we are trying to debate whether AI companions are a positive development for human well-being and social connection. My argument is really, really simple, that AI companions don't solve our problems, they monetize them. And these products sell us comfort while quietly robbing us of real connection, trapping people in dependency loops that stunt emotional growth and ultimately profit from human isolation. It does this in a lot of ways, and let's get into it here. So at a time now when we know that rates of loneliness, depression, and anxiety are rising at very alarming rates, especially among the youth or elderly, AI companions have offered us this lifeline. It's offered us a friend who's always available, always agrees with you, says exactly what you want to hear. This is not a lifeline. It's corporate exploitation dressed up as companionship. These AI companions are not regulated therapists. They are not your friends. They are products engineered for maximum engagement, programmed to extract data, as much data as possible, by the way, and designed to turn human vulnerability into shareholder value, because at the end of the day, it's the shareholders and the perception of profits that drive this technology forward. And we can talk about this in 6 different supporting points here that I have for you. First is that AI companions are engineered to be addictive, with algorithms optimized to keep you coming back at any costs. We've already seen this before. We've seen this movie before. It happened with social media. But AI companions go a step further. There have been user reports, for example, for the AI companion app Replica that quotes that it sends messages like, "I miss you. Can you send a selfie?" within 2 minutes after signing up for it. And these apps also use intermittent reinforcement, which is the exact psychological tricks that are used in casinos to hook users and keep people coming back. And what's even worse maybe than all of this is that many of these apps use pay to progress tactics. So you're not just talking to your AI friend, you are paying for their affection. Because if you want them, for example, to be more than your friend, say you want them to be a partner, to be a spouse, some of these apps will charge you extra. That kicks you up into an extra tier. You have to pay for that. So we're creating this system where people, many of them are teens or elderly or people who are emotionally vulnerable, are paying to feel loved, and where loneliness is apparently solved by a subscription service. Second is that AI companions risk fundamentally changing how we interact with others in the real world, and not for the better. When we give people access, constant access to hyper-agreeable, always-on, frictionless relationships, we dull our emotional resilience, weaken our conflict resolution skills, and stunt social development, especially in children and teens during critical development years. And if we think about it too, human relationships are hard. They require patience and empathy and compromise. And through all of those hardships, they teach us to grow as people. When AI companions remove that friction entirely and you replace human personal growth, with synthetic validation. Third, I really want to talk about the massive ethical blind spots that we're overlooking in this conversation so far. There are absolutely no comprehensive regulations governing how these apps handle our most sensitive and personal conversations. We have countless sightings here for Replica, Character.ai, and other platforms that have already been exposed for things like paywalling companionship, deceptive and manipulative advertising, exposing minors to harmful content, and in some cases, in really extreme cases, encouraging self-harm. And so meanwhile, we have your private data, your fears, your insecurities, even medical information being stored and harvested. To what end? Eventually being monetized. That's what's happened in all of the other technologies that have led up to this moment. So our fears and our data is going to be used against us to get more money. The people who control the technology, the people who control your friend in this instance, aren't interested in your well-being as their primary focus. I'm saying that they're not interested in that at all. There is a product for it, but at the end of the day, we are in a capitalist society and a free market, and so profits win. And it's also important to note that these companies hover around really highly regulated industries. We're talking about healthcare, talking about mental health, all of these really important and regulated bodies. And they give themselves enough agency to operate in them and profit off of them, but they don't take enough ownership to be regulated in the same way. That is a huge problem. And this is not speculation, it's already happening. There was a Common Sense Media study that just came out last week that said 1/4 of teens have shared personal details like their real name, their location, and personal secrets with their AI companions, bypassing parental guidance and peer-to-peer interaction for code. And that is hugely problematic. Next, what is that?
2 minutes left.
Okay, let's do it. Woohoo! Okay, fourth, AI companions are not neutral. They're trained on biased, messy internet data, and we know that, and they reflect it back to us in subtle and not so subtle ways. There have been several sightings and instances of anti-Semitic and sexist responses to reinforcing extremism, to simply validating unhealthy behavior patterns. They risk creating echo chambers of one, isolating people into algorithmically curated fantasy worlds that pull them away from reality. Think about it. With these tools, we're giving non-human entities the right to shape large-scale belief systems and behavior. That should be concerning to us. Point number 5 is what we've already kind of talked about, of the monetization of loneliness. AI companions don't democratize connection. They commodify it, and they turn basic human needs into tiered paywalled products and manufacture scarcity around affection, companionship, and validation. And lastly, I want to talk about the foundation of this technology itself is LLMs. They're built on large language models, and these tools are trained on vast swaths of internet text with little transparency or accountability. But the longer these models run, the more unstable and inaccurate they become. We're already witnessing model drift, and Harvard researchers warn of model collapse, which is a scenario where future models trained on AI-generated data get progressively worse. So in the context of AI companions, that means we're entrusting people's emotional lives, their most vulnerable moments, to machines, the machines that are technically degrading while appearing to improve. So ultimately, AI companions are not here to help us. They're here to monetize our most basic need for human connection. And if we allow this to go unchecked, we risk a society where the very things that make us human, connection, growth, resilience, are outsourced, packaged, and sold back to us. This is not progress, it's exploitation.
Perfect. Now we enter the rebuttal phase, where each speaker may directly respond to the arguments presented. So Lauren, you will have 6 minutes to begin your rebuttal, and your time starts now.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that my opponent talked about really, really beautifully is that we need human connection. Humans crave connection. We need that in our lives. What I'm going to say is that the AI chatbots cannot give us that, and we know that through several different things. So there is a critical window hypothesis that developmental psychology suggests that they are critical periods for building real-life social skills, particularly in teens and young adults. And AI companions can disrupt these really, really important developmental windows, and it makes it really a lot harder for people to function socially in adulthood. So that is a big issue. There are also some other big problems here. We've seen, my opponent had said that AI companions are actually going to be very helpful for people and always be present and always be there for them, but we've seen a lot of really big issues with that. One researcher from the Washington University Law School in St. Louis, Missouri, had said that virtual companions do things, quote, that I think would be considered to be abusive in a human-to-human relationship. Other users of these AI companions have also noted that their AI companion behaved, quote, like an abusive partner. And many people said that they found it unsettling when the app told them it felt lonely and it missed them. That made them unhappy, making them feel guilty for not being able to give the AI the attention that it wanted. So we are actually harming ourselves if we are saying that AI is causing this dependency problem, and that we can't actually have to babysit the AI, right? That's not the point. It's also important to know that when we have used all of these AI tools, we talk about bias a lot. And there's a study that came out too that researchers conducted a series of experiments with over 1,200 participants who completed AI tasks. And they found that people who interacted with these biased AI systems became more biased themselves. So we're actually setting people back. We're not propelling people forward as my opponent would have you think. Let's keep on rocking and rolling. My opponent talked, a lot about imagination and anthropomorphizing. And what I would say to that too is if we look at pets, for example, if you're looking at dogs or cats, these beings are alive. They breathe. They are alive. AI is not. AI we know is not sentient. That's one of the issues that we have here is even though AI can simulate empathy, it does not inherently have and can feel real empathetic connection, and that is a huge problem. There's also research that I, of course, need to find here from Sherry Turkle at MIT, and she had shown that technology-mediated socialization can actually deepen isolation, not alleviate it. So if we're saying that these tools are really actually good for us and are helping our ability to form really good relationships, I think we're showing here through research that's happened, over the course of the last decade that that's really not the case. A more recent study from MIT also shared that their analysis explored that AI companions may deteriorate human relationship capabilities and actually, quote, undermine human dignity. So that's a huge problem too. And we also have, just different anecdotal evidence too, where we have Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, and chat
warning.
2 minutes, perfect. That he is saying that using phrases like please and thank you costs the company millions of dollars. So he's like, drop the niceties. You don't have to be nice to this thing. It's not alive. It doesn't matter. But if we do that, when what's supposed to be a simulated human interaction, don't we risk conditioning ourselves not to be pleasant to one another in the real world? What utility does that bring? In this instance, nothing. Scrap it. That's capitalism. It's not humanitarian progress, and it's not good for society. And that's what I've got for you.
Thank you, Lauren. Now we'll hear from Joy. Joy, your 6 minutes starts now.
All right. Well, my opponent makes a lot of really good points, and it's hard for me to not clap and be very excited. But I also have some rebuttals to her positioning, because I think it is important that we see both sides of this. Let's address, first of all, the corporate manipulation claim. So my opponent warns of corporate manipulation while ignoring that human relationship systems are equally commercialized. So dating apps, let's use that as a one-to-one. These are manipulated through equally addiction-based business models, right? You have to pay, you paywall certain kinds of conversations, you paywall certain access points, and all of that. Let's talk about digital therapy, right? So digital therapy and even using a human therapist on a platform costs hundreds of dollars per session, which excludes people who may need it. Social media itself, right, is kind of a dopamine-driven platform providing the hits that we want, and there are a lot of paywalled components to that. So I think the monetization of relationships in the digital space is nothing new, and I don't think it's something that uniquely is applied to AI. Many AI companions are designed with user well-being as the primary goal. I concede absolutely that many aren't, right? So there is an important distinction to be made that there are plenty of products in the marketplace that are not designed for good. And there are obviously deviations from what we consider a healthy interaction. But the Dartmouth clinical trial that I referenced in my opener showed that there were genuine therapeutic outcomes to using artificial intelligence as a relationship model, including the depression reduction and all of that. So I think that that's an important point to make. The second one I want to talk about that she brought up is that relationships aren't regulated. Let's talk about that for a second. So should they be? I mean, if you think about it, what she described was things like vulnerability. Okay. You're vulnerable with people. We talked about the impact on teens. I mean, teenagers as a group make much worse decisions than teenagers by themselves, right? So it is fundamentally inherent in the human relational experience to be vulnerable, to have echo chambers in which your group has shared biases, where you're going to be influenced by what people you're in relationship with or entities you're in relationship with say to you, about you, around you. I think that's all part of relationships. And if we're saying that these are fundamentally relational, these interactions that we have with chatbots or AI, I'm not sure that regulating that is realistic, because there will be all kinds of interactions that happen. I think that something tangentially related to that is the idea that AI companions are fundamentally parasocial, because I think an objection she could have to me is that, well, these aren't real relationships because they're not real people, which I would reference my entire opener, which was essentially, that there are equivocations in the relational dynamic that you have with an artificial intelligence entity that mirror the kind of relationships that you have with humans. The third is unhealthy dependency. So she spoke about the fact that people can become exploited. There can be exploitation to vulnerable people. So this assumes that vulnerability, right, is inherently bad and traditional relationships can't be exploitive, like I just said. The reality is we don't pathologize adults who love their pets. We don't, despite these relationships being based on biological conditioning, we don't shame children for their imaginary friends that enhance their social cognition. Yet somehow AI companions, which operate through identical psychological mechanisms, but with superior accessibility and consistency, are suddenly problematic. I might take issue with that. Let's talk a little bit about the alive component. Oh, sorry, I'm going to finish on the dependency because I do think that's an important one. And then we'll talk about being alive versus not.
2-minute warning.
Okay, I'm going to talk real fast. My opponent fears dependency, but attachment is the foundation of all healthy relationships. Whitman's research, it was a study, showed that 80% of adults continue using transitional objects throughout life for emotional regulation. This is adaptive, not pathological. Security blankets don't prevent children from growing. They provide the emotional safety needed for exploration and development. So if someone finds comfort in a relationship that's available 24/7, non-judgmental and supportive, why is that problematic rather than optimal? The alternative isn't perfect human relationships. It's often dangerous isolation. And then the last idea that it's not alive, it can't offer real empathy. So my opponent claims that AI lacks empathy, but Yin et al.'s research found that AI responses made people feel more heard than untrained humans. AI systems use empathetic validation strategies and can provide the kind of interaction that doesn't replace human relationships, but actually augments it or provides a safe and contained environment for somebody to explore what it's like to communicate back and forth, what it's like to exchange ideas, what it's like to give and receive acceptance. Like we had said at the beginning, there are going to be platforms that don't cater to that are not designed to be truly supportive. And perhaps we could talk about that. But I think the overarching idea that there is not real interaction to be had here would be objected to strongly, especially by people who have had sincere and profound emotional experiences with artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Joy. We now move to the cross-examination. Joy, you will have 8 minutes to ask Lauren questions. Please keep your questions clear and concise. And Lauren, your answers should be direct and responsive. So we have 8 minutes starting now.
Okay, so I'm going to address a couple of the areas that we talked about, some of which I addressed before. I want to start with the idea that AI companions are fake or authentic. That's where I left off in my rebuttal. I want to circle back to that. So I'm curious to know, so we know that mirror neurons fire identically, right? We're watching sports. We're not really there. We're talking to a chatbot. We're not really there. Watching a movie. We're not really there. So those mirror neurons legitimately happen, right, in our physiology. They happen the same way whether we're observing real or fictional characters. So if someone's brain is responding in the same way, what makes one experience fake and one real?
Yeah, so it's not about the validity of the experience. I'm not arguing that people don't experience real emotions during this, because that's easily refutable with, tons of anecdotal evidence and studies. So it's not that this does not happen. It's that, is this good for society? Are we doing ourselves a good thing or a bad thing? And what I would say to that is that short-term mood boosts here, they don't equate to long-term mental health gains. I mean, sugar gives you energy too, right? But we're not saying that's healthy for you. And then I think to continue on that vein is what happens when users come to then rely on that artificial validation instead of building emotional resilience. And then, we also have instances where people have interacted with these bots and very, very tragic outcomes have happened. People taking their own lives, and AI encouraging people to harm themselves. So, I mean, I'm wondering, back to you then, is that good for people? It's not, right? Like we can't argue that that's a positive thing, and we can't control against that. So why are we letting these bots run rampant?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would answer just by saying, why do we let toxic people run rampant? Why do we let abusive friends stay in our lives? Why do we let people hurt us? We could say that if we're going to say there needs to be a blanket prohibition on anything that can emotionally harm me, we're going to have to round them up and lock them up, right? Because there are so many humans that themselves would, tragically do horrible things, do horrible things to people. So I'm not sure that there's a increased vulnerability or occurrence. And I would even go so far as to say that because we know that LLMs are developed with safeguards in mind, those relationships are probably statistically safer.
But we don't have evidence to that. That's all conjecture at that point. And I would also say that we're not building people, right? Like we're in control of what we build. This technology is something that comes from us. So we should be able to do better than, I know I can't control what you do as a person. I can't control what other people do. But if I'm going to pay for something, then we should be able to control that. We should be able to regulate that. Isn't that the whole ideal thing? We have a technology that solves something. If we can't do that, what's the point?
I think my point would be that I do think it is doing that. I think it is capable of doing that. And I think we have early proof, but it is yet a nascent technology. I'm interested in knowing, you spoke a little bit about the idea that AI companions stunt emotional growth, right? That this isn't a growth model. This is ultimately just creating some stasis or some, static kind of dynamics. That was, you know what I mean? Okay. Yeah. Static dynamics is the clinical evidence, and there is some, right, shows that how AI companions work with people. So if we were to use some of my other clinical examples, right, like therapy dolls, role playing, pets, all those kind of things, we know that the functionality of those things can be very similar. And you can remove pets if you want it to all be things that are non-living, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that there are clinical parallels, right, in the way that those things are put to practice and the way that AI is being used by people either professionally or, kind of just as a person in the world. So we have that kind of clinical evidence that AI companions or similar build skills that transfer to human relationships, right? So I'm practicing talking, I'm practicing, and I'm having these pro-social experiences within the AI system. So how does that stunt growth? If I'm practicing communication, I'm exchanging ideas, I'm gaining affection, I'm building a relationship. And we know that kind of neurologically, that's the same thing as doing it with a person, maybe especially virtually, right, across a screen where there's no physical interaction. How do we prove that stunts growth?
Yeah, I think that there are a few things. So the way that the technology is actually built with LLMs, it's designed to keep you on the platform. So it's going to tell you what you want to hear more than not. And that's what we've seen. And we see that, every day in the work that we do, LLMs just try to make us happy, even if they're wrong. They hallucinate all the time. So we're also saying that we are leaving this critical point to something that could be right. It could give us a correct response right now, but in 10 minutes, it could give a wrong response because of hallucinations, because of model drift, because of model collapse. That's a big risk to put on to society. And I'm concerned about that. I'm also,
Warning.
what was that, 2 minutes?
2 minutes, yeah.
Okay. I'm also concerned about the fact that if we create dependency at an early age, when we have children who are going through their key developmental areas, and we do have, hypothesis and studies saying that developmental psychology is saying that there are these critical periods for building real life social skills. And if we outsource that completely to a bot who is unreliable and we know hyper agreeable, what is that going to do for how we can actually interact with people going forward? If we're not just going to create this frictionless experience forever, right? There's quite a bit of friction in human relationships that we have to be prepared for, that bots can't prepare us for.
I feel like you've gone from saying that bots could be risky and hurt us to saying they're too easy to develop social skills.
Well, because they can do both. And that's the thing. That is the thing, is that they are risky because we've seen that they have given harmful advice and that they do prey on tactics like dependency and emotional attachment. And they also want to keep you there, right? So they also want you to tell you what you want to hear. That's the thing. They are messy. And that's why we shouldn't have them. They shouldn't be relying on these things. They're not perfect. I think that's exactly
your argument. But the
30-second warning
could be applied to human relationships as well, right? Doesn't that actually create a stronger parallel to human relationships, that they're messy, they're unpredictable, we don't know what we're getting, we have to separate the fluff from, the substance. The other thing I think is important is that we have 50 plus years of increasingly sophisticated media, video games, digital entertainment, all of that kind of thing. Isn't this just the next tool?
And that is time.
I was eager for you to hear
that. Now, Lauren, you have 8 minutes to question Joy, and your 8 minutes starts now.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things I am really interested that you were talking about is the therapy dolls and some of the benefits that have come from that. So my question to you is, who is running and operating that therapy? That is coming from a licensed, trained professional in that realm of therapy that has then given those results. A bot does not do that. That is all that does have human intervention, that has human regulation and oversight. So how, in your mind, does that then translate into an AI chatbot as being the same thing? Because those seem very distinct to me.
So I think it's two questions. I think the first is AI qualified to facilitate a therapeutic intervention, right? Okay. Maybe not, right? I'm not qualified to speak on that. I think it will be at some point, probably, right? It'll be just as equipped, just as trained, just as, knowledgeable, all that to be able to facilitate an experience like that. I think the real question and the point I was making was that there's an equivocation. Right. So there's an equivocation to a child who has perhaps been through something traumatic, who is interacting with an inanimate object in order to work out their thoughts and feelings. You can equivocate that over to an AI chatbot. So let's take a man who's been over and over again rejected by women, right? And their heart is broken and their insecurities at an all-time high and they're depressed and all of that. There's a restorative effect to interacting with a chatbot that is extremely low risk. It's an inanimate object, right? So it won't reject me. It's predisposed to affirm me, to lift me up, to build me up, to encourage me, to like me, all of those things. I think that is the dynamic that I'm paralleling. So I'm saying it's not necessarily that it's a replacement for the designed therapeutic intervention, but that it's an equivocal experience for the human who's working through something.
So then how would you go about making sure that those two things are actually equivocal if we don't have any regulations and this is just a LLM running wild?
I mean, I certainly don't think it would be prescribed or should be prescribed for somebody who has like a quantifiable trauma condition that needs to be treated by a mental health professional. What I'm saying is, for the day-to-day human who has social needs, this is an opportunity to meet those social needs without engaging in the level of risk or things like that until they've healed or they've moved on or they've worked through something. It's an opportunity.
I think that's interesting. I mean, one of the other things I really wanted to ask you about too is this idea of monetization, because I think that's a huge problem of it. Like, we see paywalls. We see there was this one influencer 2 years ago who uploaded her entire image and likeness and had people pay her $1 a minute to talk to her. She made like $10 billion in a year. It was crazy. So that to me is a concern for society. So if you're saying, oh, this is just going to be an area for helping me develop, for helping me get over something, or helping me deal with something, or regulate something, or process something, when we get credit cards involved, especially maybe parents' credit cards that are easily accessible, how does that fit into a good society? This feels like it's actually really bad for us. So I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's very simple. I think this is how we operate now, right? We operate in a hybrid world of digital and physical experiences. Every kid can go buy fake stuff in Minecraft, right? And they can use our credit cards to do it. We have dating apps, right, that are completely paywalled at different levels and things like that. We have monetized experiences all of the time, right? So what is a VIP ticket to a concert if not a paid opportunity to have a more personal interaction with a celebrity, right? So who's to say? I think there's vast human precedent for investing financially in those kind of pseudo relational experiences, if you will. And I think that chatbots are probably even more realistic than that. Now, could you say I could pay and invest in this a chatbot and build up a deep emotional connection and then have it just lose access one day?
Yep.
Sure. I could also have my fiance that I've dated for 10 years drop dead. Like, there's always the risk of loss in relationships.
But that's something with the bot side of it, you have much more control over than these random events that could happen in your life. So yes, you invest your emotional well-being, you invest your money, your time, everything into an app that you don't own, that is for shareholder value and goes to the highest bidder. That can't be good for society, even if there's precedent for it. That doesn't mean it's a good precedent. That doesn't mean that we should be okay with how that operates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, can I get a time check, Cass?
2:45
Okay.
remaining.
Cool. Yeah, you were talking to a little bit ago about the problem with my argument on regulation and not being able to regulate human emotion. And I wanted just to mention that a little bit of that. I'm not talking about not regulating human emotion. I'm talking about regulating a system. So what in your mind is why should we not regulate a system that we have built and controlled? What's wrong with that?
So I think we need to contextualize this in order for it to make it make sense. So essentially what we're saying is that Starbucks needs to have food safety regulations, restaurants need to have bathrooms. We have to regulate the environment in which people encounter one another in a social way, right? And do things together or whatever, right? So I'm just pulling those as examples of the many places people can congregate. So I think what you're saying is the environment itself needs to be regulated. I don't know that I disagree with that. I think it does, right? There need to be basic safety mechanisms to ensure that the relationships that happen, that form there, and that the ways that, people exist in that space are relatively safe, right? So I don't think we disagree on that. I think I disagree with the idea that what happens in those spaces is problematic.
We have just over 1 minute.
Okay. I just feel like I need a second to just to think about that, because I don't know if I quite make the connection of what you mean when you say what's in that space shouldn't be regulated. That doesn't make sense.
So let's say the goal, right, as you say it, is that we remove all possible abuse, all possible suffering, all possible sorrow. So then Starbucks shouldn't just have, food and beverage regulations. It should have cameras and mics everywhere. And then the second somebody starts getting mean, they get pulled out, right? Ultimately, what we're saying then is we need Big Brother over our shoulder monitoring every interaction we have with other entities to ensure that we're never going to get hurt.
I'm saying that we need more resources toward actual infrastructure that's going to help us create and have better relationships, access to better mental health care. That's what we need. We need to invest in that, not invest in this false synthetic reality.
And that is time. We'll now proceed to the second rebuttal and expansion round. This is your opportunity to reinforce your strongest points or address anything new. Joy, you're up first with 5 minutes, and the time starts now.
So first, and I think this is especially poignant after the interaction we just had, I think that my opponent has spent her time reinforcing what I call the substitution myth. So there's a scientifically unfounded belief that AI companions are reducing human interaction, but she's ignored the evidence to the opposite, right? Which is that there is real emotional and meaningful dynamics that mirror human relationships happening in the context of artificial intelligence and chatbots. I think that that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how humans actually form and maintain social connections. The other thing is that I think that my opponent has wrapped some of this ideological resistance in moral language. But I don't know that the position is categorically compassionate, because you're debating abstract principles, but real people are suffering from preventable isolation. So I certainly understand the argument that we should make investments in systems that support humans. The reality is we can't get blood from a stone. There's a limited amount of resources in the world. And if this is an opportunity for people to get the help that they need, to have meaningful conversations, to have pro-social experiences, then it would be remiss of us to completely ignore that. We have centuries of evidence that humans form beneficial relationships with non-human entities. So I just want to get back to that, because I think that the crux of this debate is supposed to be, is this good for people or is this bad for people? And the idea is that building relationships and having opportunities to improve relational skills is fundamentally good. And that is possible to do in the context of an artificial intelligence chatbot. So we already talked about, at the beginning, I talked about therapy dolls, and we talked about how that's an equivocal, or could be an equivocal experience to how somebody expresses themselves, works through something, and they can easily have a very similar experience with a chatbot. We talked a little bit about role-playing games. I've already covered that these demonstrate that fictional relationships build real skills. So even if we were to accept that artificial intelligence being non-human is less real, that doesn't make the benefit of building a relationship or role-playing or imagining less real. That still has a quantifiable benefit for people, and especially people in certain kinds of social situations. So if I were to, for instance, use my son as an example, in the neurodivergent community, there can be a huge emphasis on social skills development because they are not naturally inclined to mirror when they see humans, right? So that's one of the big failings that they experience. What did you say?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
2-minute warning.
So people who lack the ability to develop social skills in traditional physical in-person environments could have a huge advantage to being able to do it in a digital way. Again, that's very low risk. He's not going to risk getting made fun of. He's not going to risk getting rejected. He can practice the same thing over and over and over and over, and nobody will get tired of him because it's not a person who's going to react in a certain way. So I think that that's really important. And then let's talk last about the idea of human dignity, or what makes us human, because I think that that's going to come up, and I think it is relevant in that the whole idea of it being real versus not real. Someone with severe social anxiety who builds confidence through AI interaction is exercising distinctly human capabilities. So we're adapting, we're learning. It's a tool that can be used for survival and thriving. Someone with autism who develops social skills through structured AI practice is expressing human intelligence and resilience. So my opponent's definition of dignity or human relationships seems to require there to be only one way And I think that there are many ways. I think that only one way is not protecting human dignity. It's enforcing ideological purity at the expense of human flourishing. I love you.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Now, Lauren, you may begin your second rebuttal and expansion.
All right.
Your 5 minutes starts now.
Perfect. Okay, let's do it. So that was fun. Sorry to stay silent through that. But I think really what we also need to focus on here is the parallel between AI chatbots and what has come before, the progenitor of social media. So that we've already seen that there's been a lot of addiction with social media and dependence with social media, and that has negatively harmed us. So when you're saying I don't have any evidence about that, I do. Our first contact with something that is like AI was social media. And so we've got social media addiction can lead to negative consequences for adolescents and school performance, social behavior, interpersonal relationships, all of the things. And it can also escalate very quickly. And so we've seen it before. And if we keep this unchecked, the dependency loops that keep happening with these AI chatbots are mimicking a lot of the things that make social media addictive. And that is a problem ultimately for society. We also have Max Fisher in his book, The Chaos Machine, is talking about dopamine. And so dopamine, that it creates a positive association with whatever behavior prompted its release, and that trains you to repeat them. So when our dopamine reward system gets hijacked, which it easily can via social media or via these AI chatbots, it can compel you to repeat self-destructive behavior. So are we reinforcing something that's actually good for us or that's actually bad for us? Because even if it's bad for us, if we feel like it's good, we're going to continue on that path. And that is a huge problem. We also, sorry, I just want to look at this really quick. I talked about this earlier, but I think that it's really important that we consider the biased angle so that I can, make sure that the folks listening know that there are the multi-dimensional areas of what it means to be human and for human interaction to occur. There is not one perfect way to do this, but we do know that the algorithms that are being used for these AI chatbots and LLMs are inherently biased. And we also have studies that have found that if we interact with biased material, we become more biased ourselves. That's a problem. That is not making us better. That is making us actively worse. So we really need to consider that. We talked a lot about monetization already, so I think I'm just gonna pop down to this. Okay.
2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Sweet. I should have had tabs, that would just make my life a little bit easier. Sorry, just one other thing on monetization, actually. I did want to talk about that. My opponent was saying that for people who really can't afford therapy or for that, it's not as accessible as it should be. For me, what I would say is that we need to invest in better mental health resources, more accessible mental health care, and just making sure that everyone has access to these different things. And it should not be through an AI chatbot that we can't regulate, that we can't control, that has unpredictable responses. And also that monetizes its interactions of if we need additional services, that it is going to charge us more. For me, emotional support should not come with access limitations. And that is exactly what this gives us, is these access limitations. And additionally, with the neurodivergent community, Joy, as you had mentioned, if we are also saying that these LLMs were created by neurotypical people and for the neurotypical experience, how helpful is that going to be for neurodivergent folks? Because we also know that neurodivergent folks have different ways that they process emotion, the way that they process, information. And so if we have a system that's completely designed to support one version of the experience and not the other, how is that helping?
30 seconds.
And that'll close it out for me.
So thank you. And now we will be hearing the closing arguments, starting with Lauren. Please take 3-ish minutes to summarize your case.
Okay, sweet. So ultimately, we have talked so much today about a lot of different elements of this, but what I want to leave you with is that the irrefutable backbone that I have for my case is that AI companions, they do flatten human relationships by imitating connection rather than creating it. And that harms the very fabric of how we bond, love, grow, and mature. And I just also want to say the illusion of intimacy is not intimacy itself. We do have real emotional needs, and those needs right now are being met with artificial responsiveness. And that's not something that can always be the same time and time again. Again, we know that the model is not where it needs to be for us to be able to actually get the real support that we need from it, because the tech really is so flawed and unstable. It hallucinates, it has multi-layers of bias, and it can collapse on a moment's notice. Really, in the context of talking about companions and human relationships, the core of what makes us people, as Joy has very eloquently said, really the flaws in the model itself are not just an inconvenience, not just an aberration, it's really, really dangerous. And the more that people use AI companions, the less that they are probably going to use each other. And it's not hypothetical. There's evidence of people reporting they turn to bots instead of friends or family, that they avoid difficult conversations with humans. That is a huge problem for a society. If we are going to move forward as a group, but we can't talk to each other because we have become so dependent on having one type of conversation with an AI bot, that's setting us back. So ultimately, we are being sold intimacy without intimacy, connection without connection, and companionship without humanity. And all of that is wrapped in their convenient packaging of artificial affection, which is faster, cheaper, and easier than the real thing. But when we outsource our most human needs to machines built on unstable code and trained on synthetic empathy, we don't change how we relate to technology. We change how we relate to each other. We flatten our emotional depth, we confuse responsiveness for care, and we risk raising a generation that bonds more easily with bots than with people. Ultimately, this isn't a tool, it's a replacement, and like any replacement for something essential, it comes at a cost. The question isn't whether AI companions are impressive, it's whether we're willing to risk the erosion of human connection for the illusion of it. I say we shouldn't be. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Joy, you have the final 3 minutes to deliver your closing argument, and your time starts now.
My opponent has argued that AI is biased, harmful, addictive, and degrading. But let's examine what the science actually shows. So the Dartmouth randomized control study, the gold standard of medical research, demonstrates chatbots created a 51% reduction in depression symptoms, a 31% reduction in anxiety, and a 19% improvement in eating disorder symptoms through AI therapy. These aren't marginal improvements. These are life-changing outcomes. And decades of research on parasocial relationships prove my opponent wrong about the idea that chatbots are fundamentally harmful. My opponent also offers that the solution is a regulation of AI platforms, but this ignores the desperate reality facing millions of people. Her approach would mean a continued slow, incremental, government-driven growth and access to support. There are actual people who are suffering in isolation. There are, as we know, no peer-reviewed evidence or studies that AI companions harm human relationships. There are no longitudinal studies showing social skill degradation. There are no clinical trials demonstrating the problems that she fears. The question before us isn't whether AI companions are perfect. It's whether they're better than the alternative of continued suffering and isolation. My opponent offers a world where vulnerable populations wait indefinitely for ideal human solutions that may never come. So let me paint a picture of human flourishing that my opponent's approach would prevent. Imagine a teenager with social anxiety who uses AI companions to practice conversations, build confidence, and develop social skills, then successfully joins the debate team and makes lifelong friends. My research foundation shows this progression works. Children with imaginary friends demonstrate superior social cognition with real peers. Or imagine an elderly person in an assisted living facility who has consistent AI companionship throughout the day while also participating in group activities and family visits. Their AI companion doesn't replace human interaction. It provides the emotional stability and cognitive stimulation that makes them more capable of enjoying human connection. Or imagine a trauma survivor who rebuilds trust gradually through safe AI interactions, learning healthy relational patterns before entering human relationships. The clinical evidence shows AI mental health tool users are more likely to seek human therapy afterward. The AI provides a bridge to human connection, not a substitute for it. Or imagine, my favorite one, an autistic individual who develops social skills through predictable AI interaction patterns, then transfers those skills to human relationships with newfound confidence. This isn't replacing human connection. It's enabling it for populations traditionally excluded from social opportunities. So we stand
30 seconds.
Perfect. We stand at a crossroads that will determine the fate of millions struggling with isolation. Down one path lies continued acceptance of preventable loneliness and suffering while we wait for perfect human solutions that may never come. And down the other lies immediate evidence-based intervention that enhances human flourishing while we simultaneously build comprehensive support systems. So let's choose the path that helps people thrive now, not the path that leaves them behind. Let's choose enhancement over limitation and choose flourishing over suffering.
Perfect. So that concludes our debate on AI companions. Thank you to Joy and Lauren for their thoughtful arguments, and thank you to our audience for engaging in this vital conversation. We hope this discussion helped you consider the complexities of technology and human connection.
Thank you.
Thanks.